Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. It's really wonderful to see such a full hall. My name is Sigrid Adriaanses. I'm a professor in civil and environmental engineering, and I'm the faculty director of the Keller Center. And the Keller Center is really a place where innovation, collaboration, and social impact all come together. The Keller Center was started because of a very generous gift by Dennis Keller, who was a visionary alum. And in the Keller Center, we try to nurture the next generation of leaders, of innovators that are working and bringing together practice and theory in the domain of design, entrepreneurship, tech, and society. And we hope that they do this to drive positive societal impact. This event is co-sponsored by, and I have to put my glasses on, the Keller Center Makerspace, the Princeton Art Museum, thank you very much, James, and the Princeton University Library Makerspace. I'm now going to introduce our Makerspace manager, Lee Cole, who is going to introduce the speaker. Thank you very much for coming.
Hi, everybody. How are you? I just want to say good afternoon and thank you for coming. As Sigrid just mentioned, my name is Lee Cole, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all here today for the first of what I hope will be many more Keller Center Makerspace Speaker Series events. Today's event was made possible, as Sigrid mentioned, with the support of the Princeton University Library Makerspace, the Princeton University Art Museum, and the staff, faculty, and leadership of the Keller Center. I'd like to take a second to say thank you and ask for a brief round of applause for all of the wonderful people who made this possible. So together with a team of 11 enthusiastic student employees that I manage, we run the Keller Center Makerspace in the engineering quadrangle. If you haven't found us yet, we are in the very, very back. Also available through Google Maps if you can't find us. We provide training, materials, and resources that support the integration of creative technologies into academic research and personal projects. We are building a campus community that is open to all students, faculty, and staff. And to everyone in attendance today, either in person or via live stream, thank you for joining us. And to everybody on campus, we encourage you to drop in and learn about our space, take a workshop, or just get trained on our wood, because that's something that we also offer. There's no experience required. That's something that's really key to our community, but enthusiasm and a willingness to learn is really the sort of key factor. So please come and join us. I started the speaker series to bring artists to campus who incorporate creative technologies into their practice, artists who are entrepreneurs and innovators, and artists who have a generous enough spirit to be very real about what it takes to be a creative professional in contemporary society. Sarah Hussaini exemplifies all of those traits in her work and in her life. And I couldn't be prouder to have her here today as the first speaker in this series. So please join me in welcoming Sarah.
Thank you for coming. And for the 100-something people online, thank you also for coming. So cool. I thought that like 5 people would come to this, so then I started getting messages about like people not being able to get tickets, and anyway, mind blown. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the Keller Center, Princeton University Library Makerspace, and the Art Museum for making this possible. And thank you to Lee for being my mom manager through all this. Okay, let's do this. My name is Sarah. I'm somewhere between a potter, ceramicist, designer. I look like this. I run a ceramics and design studio in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. I started it in 2017, so this stubborn child is now almost 8 years old. If you haven't Googled me yet, let me save you the time. This is what I do. The studio is most known for this precision glazing style and layering of color and geometry. This layering technique is what the whole studio has been built on. I'll give you a very quick history of me before we go into my brain, just so you know what's going on here. I went to undergrad at the University of Illinois, where I studied architecture. It was very conservative, very technical. I leaned very heavily into learning how things worked, how things got put together, but I felt very out of place as a designer. So like most rebellious children, I ran away from home, moved to New York, went to Columbia for my master's, also in architecture. And I found that as much as I was into design and image making, I still like technical drawings, and my ability to draw was actually what set me apart in a place where people didn't actually focus on how things worked. This is a space station I worked on with NASA. Columbia was very conceptual, as you can see. It was a natal space station, so it was about giving birth in space. It was really amazing because I felt very at home as a designer, but my technical knowledge helped make my little dream worlds believable through details and drawing and prototypes. After I graduated, I worked for about 5 years chasing this special place again that I had found between design and the technical. I loved it at first. I did what we called skin on this project. All I did for a year was model parametric panels and windows that could be used on the exterior of this building. I loved it. I loved being obsessed with something technical to make something aesthetic happen. Had the mind of someone that got stuck drawing details, but then the taste of someone that like never knew what a detail was. I worked on a theater and another job where I made all these steam bent custom panels with different densities for sound absorption or reflection. Anyway, you get it. It didn't last. This is the part that I can't say when I do like corporate speaking gigs, because they literally ask me before I talk to anyone to like not encourage anyone to quit their jobs. But since we're in academia for the evening, I actually worked at a huge global firm. I never knew when I was going to go home or what deadline I was going to be on. Everyone was rude. Everything was black or white. It was cutthroat, dress pants, suit jacket type of legacy place where you popped on your headphones and you didn't talk to anyone unless it was necessary. It was around 2017. The ceramics I was making as a hobby since high school started getting some interest, and I felt like it was becoming more of a side gig. So I thought long and hard about what the aesthetic would be. You know, what was the umbrella that this work would fit under? So I had one idea. Please picture this with me. I wanted to make work that was the exact opposite of everything in that office and everyone that had ever been in it. And that is the beautiful story of how Not Work Related was born. It was sugar, spice, and a little bit of spite. These are actual photos from the office I worked in, not from these aren't people I know. I didn't take them because why would I? But this was the environment. So this new project was going to be everything that my job couldn't be. It was going to be fun and playful and explorative. It was going to be well designed because it wasn't going to be designed by a client on their kid's iPad. It was going to be free to transform and grow. It was going to make absolutely no money. But that was okay because I was an architect now. Also, the culture of it was going to be so elite. It was going to bring light to the land of noise canceling over-the-ear headphones. I thrived when I found the balance between parts of my brain, but when I didn't, I struggled. So I jumped job to job to job. I kept a foot in architecture for 3 more years while I grew this thing. I worked freelance from 3 days down to 2, down to 1 day a week, which like very hard to find a job that lets you work 1 day a week. I was freelancing for 10 hours a week in 2020 when 2020 happened. And this is where we are at now. I get asked a lot if I regret going to grad school and this time spent as an architect, but beyond the debt, which I feel very bad bringing this up with students here, but I don't. I think I was so deeply influenced by my time in school. My work ethic and aesthetic all come from that place. I have this very visceral memory. My first day of grad school, we're sitting in a room like 3 times the size of this space. And we were told, look left and look right. Only one of you will become an architect. And I thought, obviously, like, it's me. I'm that girl. But Columbia taught me how to design. It didn't matter that I wasn't that girl. With a lot of tangible skills, it taught me how to research and how to create something physical from an idea. Today, we're a little team of 3. We've been as big as 4. My 2 assistants each work about 1 day a week. Nora and Joe. I love them. They made it possible for me to focus on what sets the studio apart, which is the surface design that you are starting to see in the images and videos. They keep the studio moving in the background and by my side while I try to push where it goes. A lot of my time is spent glazing and taping. Glazing sometimes looks like the first video, but a lot of times it's touch-ups and scraping and filling in glaze. Every exposed edge, every underlaid color creates a place where something could go wrong. And I try to be really public about this effort and this labor because I want people to see how their objects are being made and that they're being made by a human who is imperfect, who, despite being good at what she does, still struggles to produce this work. It shows how hard it can be to do this stuff well. In traditional ceramics, I don't know if anyone here does ceramics, but people love showing evidence of the hand, whether it's throwing lines or a thumbprint left from glazing. And I'm trying to do this really strange thing with this work, which is erase my hand and everyone who works with me, their hands in it, while it's still being handmade. There's a point at which I've seen that it can go too far, where this can start to look like it came from West Elm or Anthro, like it's mass-produced by a machine, and then it feels cheap. So I'm always chasing for perfection, hoping that we kind of don't ever get there. I'm gonna swerve a little bit. Now that you know how I think and where I've come from, I want to talk about design thinking and process, how I've approached the studio and work, and how a lot of it came from my time as an architect. So I'm really just talking about workflow. There is a lot of pressure externally in this job to keep your audience engaged, to keep your content performing, and everyone loves the newest thing, and this is the process of me feeling pressed to make it. So where does it start? I think we all know that the fantasy, like the stroke of inspiration for those in creative fields, is a lie. No one wakes up with a sketch from their dreams, so I collect inspiration like this constantly, passively, like on the subway. If I see someone with a cool outfit, I'll take a picture of it. I learned to design both under pressure and need. And there is occasionally a spark, but there is a lot more methodological approach to this process. Having a place to start like this, having a place to put things that you are interested in has been really helpful to me. So from there, I put it all away. Putting it away is key for me. I don't want to remember anything one-to-one. I don't ever want to think about function or scale. I'm just trying to make something that has visual potential. Sometimes this process happens in 2D, like you just saw, and sometimes it gets taken out into 3D so I can generate something mappable on a surface. It is very normal for me to go between analog, digital, and back and forth. This fluidity has opened up this very unique space in ceramics for this work, where precision and digital tech are barely scratching the surface of traditional ceramics and pottery world, which has been running off a very robust oral tradition and vibes, pocket of vibes. I've had to figure out my own ways to do things, how to use my skills to my advantage. I'm going to show you how iteration works in the studio. Once I have a design with potential or an idea, iteration is how I work through versions of an idea with the attempt to improve it. I'm usually starting very simple. I gravitate towards very linear elements. I'm interested in a moment or an interaction and how this creates negative space across the surface because of the way that I layer. I'm going to make some very small adjustments, like rounding off the corners, to make this less rigid, to have a little bit more personality. And eventually we get to this web pattern. I really like breaking down design in terms of repeatable elements because it gives me something modular to create as a continuous pattern around a piece. So once I've taken this out of the computer, I have some questions. I'm looking at a few things. Do I like it? Do I think it's worth pushing further? Is it reproducible? Is there a good reaction to it online? And then finally, what can I do to make it better? So that was version 1. Now we try to make it more functional, a little bit more standardized for version 2. Except by gaining functionality, I think I lost some of the design language. So version 2 for me feels very cluttered. It's not as dramatic. I wasn't happy with it. So then version 3, inverted the entire design so it would feel like the lighter mesh was moving over the darker surface, and then the darker would recede. That worked really well because I didn't have little floating islands of glaze, but it still felt too cluttered. And every single dark blue piece became an individual piece to apply and remove. And that was a nightmare. So here I'm going back and forth between functionality and aesthetics. 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. I was just frustrated because I thought this design had potential and I wasn't ready to let it go, but I couldn't figure out how to do it right. So I left it for like 4 months. And I sat down with no plan and managed to make 3 more options. And if we're keeping track, the right is version 4. using the bottom design. I was way more into this, but I wanted to try one more thing. This is version 5. The benefits of this design are, one, that the mask is continuous versus the blue one originally, which was in bitty little pieces. 2, it's different from other things that I make in the studio. So usually I take things that go from rim to the foot, and it was nice for me to see me breaking some of these rules that I've made for myself. And 3, not touching the rim or the foot make this design much, much easier to produce, like by 100. So version 1, version 5 next to each other. Almost a different design entirely until you see the in-betweens. They came from the same place. Is it done? Probably not. But that's a little look into process and how iteration works. It works up close, it works far away. It is now easier to produce. It offers a new language to the studio, so it is getting there. But essentially the same cup. This process is nonlinear. I will pick things up, I will alter them, I will build them, I will change them until I'm satisfied. And it does not happen in a specific amount of time. It can take years. Testing and prototyping always happens in the background. You're seeing the previous slides probably over a year of adjustments, and this will continue to adjust as the studio grows, as I grow. So what this ultimately leads to, and what has been a cornerstone of this studio, is iteration. The process of going through and making incremental improvements. I'm going to show you this process for other designs in the studio, except I'm not going to show you my work. The reality of design is that the first version of something is not usually its final or best form. So on the left will be an image of an early idea or a prototype, and then what it looks like now on the right. Just before and afters, trying to accept that these designs are the same thing. We make stuff in the studio all the time that doesn't turn out well, that doesn't go into production. And I don't think that is ever a waste of time. Even if it doesn't roll out as product today, this is work from 2017 compared to work in 2023. The same idea is being explored, but executed in a completely different way. Similarly, these images are probably 4 years apart. I'm a huge believer that you never know if your future self will be able to take it somewhere that you just didn't have the ability to in the current moment. And a part of me loves looking back at this early cringy work, because revisiting work like this for me, it's like opening a gift from my past self. Someone did almost all the work. I just gotta pick it up, do my part, and make it look good. This is a super old idea, so old that I didn't even take a photo of it. The piece on the left, I had to text my friend Ellen to see if she hadn't thrown it out yet, because I didn't have any documentation of ever having made it, just the memory. I would argue that this is the same design idea on both sides of the slide. The long-term potential of the idea was there all along. It just took 5+ years to figure out how to execute it in a way that felt like me. This is to say, please take pictures of all your work, take a video of all your work, document it so you don't have to text your friend and be like, please tell me you kept that old bad pot I made in like 2018. Can you send me a video of it so I can put it in a presentation? I also think, for me, going back to early work and pulling threads from it has made the design language more cohesive, because it's strategically coming from the same origin point. I always bring in new inspiration, like I showed you guys, but I also have a thread of history too. So now, we're going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to compare some work over the years, and you'll see some of the dramatic jumps the studio has made. I'm about to show you some of the worst work that I've ever made. And there's a point, yes. There's a point here which you can see the studio start to take shape, and it's pretty cool. Okay, 2017. Studio was just this very expensive, little time-consuming project. A lot of one-offs. This period, for me, is design gold. I did so many things, and none of them well, but I tried so many things. 2018, I started taking on bigger projects. I learned how to make multiples, how to make money. I want to note that I've had to accept the early version of this work by accepting that a huge part of success in design is not perfection, but progress. So progress over perfection. You'll see in 2019, I made a huge technique breakthrough. It's the technique that the entire studio is built off of to this day. And then in 2020, I formally got my own studio space. So you don't see a huge jump here because I was learning to do this as like a job. I would always rather look at something like 2020 and be like, than be like, damn, 2020 was my year. I peaked in 2020. Luckily, in 2021, I think that the work fills out a little bit. It's starting to have a perspective. It's very Bauhaus still. But then in 2022, I had finally gotten an assistant for 2 days a week. And for the first time, I had room to play again. So you see way more testing this year, trying to figure out what I can do. I'm always more afraid of being gassed out than anything else. That the point at which the studio starts to stagnate terrifies me more than making something that isn't good. So I'm always willing to try things because not everything has to make it out. For me, it is always worth making 1 or 2 of something, and then maybe we don't make more of them. Maybe it's 5 years. Maybe I'll come back to it as a better designer, a better ceramicist, but it's always worth getting the idea out of your head. This is the last couple years. As someone who is very impatient, critical, never satisfied, I am often like, wait, just give me like 1 more year. Just watch how much better I can get. But I'm learning to be satisfied with where I am as long as I'm improving what I'm capable of putting out and of besting myself. Last year, it was very hard to push the work. I started teaching workshops. I started talking publicly about the studio like this. I did a couple of college lectures. I did 2 huge collabs. I've never been pulled away from my own work in this way before. Even though it is growing the studio, it has been a completely new experience for me. I kind of touched on this, but for me, the goal is always to look back in 5 years and flinch. In return, that means that me, Sarah, in 5 years, I hope she looks back and flinches because it means that she made leaps and bounds from this work. I think you can flinch and still be proud of where you were and what you were able to accomplish in a moment. Through and through, it's always me trying to get to a language that is more cohesive, more ownable, more identifiable as the work of this singular studio in an era where we have so much to stand out against, and then pushing the skills, the possibilities. At the end of the day, I just want to impress myself, and that's who I'm ultimately in competition with. Okay, enough motivational speaking for a century. You're going to start to hear me talk more about money, material, and struggling against those variables in the next section, and then even more in the next. I'm going to take you quickly through a couple of projects, and you can see a world in which I can't just make whatever I want, even though I try. These projects have led through to a lot of breakthroughs, and I don't know why, but they have always put me in a place that I don't want to be. They're always trying, but I've always learned or grown from them. Okay, I don't really do a ton of client work, but a couple years ago I worked with Brooklyn Brewery to make cups to launch this beer. I was locked into this pop art pun and also this like very unfortunate Christmas wrapping paper palette. It changed mid-project, and then I got this can and it was just like, okay, I have to make something work, and that's hard for me. I'm so free with what I do for myself. I don't give myself constraints like this, and so I started looking at pop art, and obviously people like Roy Lichtenstein. But the moments I was most drawn to were these dot gradients and how they showed depth across the surface, specifically the gradients, not just the dots. And these are some very ugly sketches that you can see me starting to play with this dot gradation on the left. I knew I needed 2 parts, one that was glaze and one that was an underlay color, because at that point I had at least those rules for my work. Eventually got here. I had 2 sections, but also played with dot size, like the Roy Lichtenstein pieces that I referenced, where the 2 patterns met in the middle, that point at which the foreground and background would swap. And it results in this little wavy line running across the surface, white on top making the other color recede, and feeling like the white is dripping over something underneath. The hardest part of this was getting the math right on the template and getting it to fit around the cups seamlessly. I literally had a template with holes and I would mark an X everywhere a dot went. I measured this and rebuilt it over and over and over again in Illustrator because I hadn't yet figured out that I could have just 3D modeled it. I hadn't at this point fully connected those parts of my brain and the skills. It has taken a really long time for me to figure out how to go in between the worlds of architecture and ceramics and design and reapply the skills that I've learned in those places. This is also my first cast project, which ultimately was very smart and very dumb. I used to throw everything, so like on a pottery wheel, but these are cast in a mold. And I wanted them to stack perfectly, but I also knew that I needed to save time on this project. So I could do the like skin, to bring back an earlier word. Again, casting would one day become the smartest, bestest strategy to have ever come into my little brain. It would change the studio forever, but not at this point. I'm so glad I cast these. But now that we have been a casting studio for like 2 years, that girl had absolutely no idea what she was doing, no business casting, but this whole project was cast. It was the first time that we had done a cast project in the studio. The other part that was ridiculous was that every single dot was placed by hand. So I would peel a whole sheet of dots and then I would put them all over my left hand. And I would use a needle to lift and place every single dot like a lunatic. And then every dot had to get removed by hand. And I got paid like $35 a cup, which is why I didn't do another project for like 3 years. That would put us to 2024, when I finally agreed to do something, and it was to make pieces to launch with the Whitney Biennial. The design package was a series of super vibrant gradients. I was like, sick, I'm the perfect person for this. I do gradients all the time. Painted by hand, gradients, I can do this. But it's never that easy. And getting the colors right was a struggle. And then creating a sharp, high contrast fade was a struggle because I usually blend the transition across the entire piece. And I couldn't do that here. And everything looked like pumpkins. Until strangely, I saw this technique on a video on Instagram, and it was a girl painting a cabinet. And hear me out, because it actually worked. I could paint the top and the bottom colors and then just do this and create the middle transition, and it worked better than it should have. This saved this whole project. Also, you remember 2 minutes ago when I was making $35 for an hour and a half of work on those cups. I was going to try to not do that again, and that meant I had to make the design easier without anyone being like, this is significantly less good. So I pulled one row of the grid off the top. It was easier, proportionally weird. And then like the arc design, we like painfully dissected. Having a pattern touch a corner like a rim is very hard. Every line has to be cleaned perfectly. So I took 2 rows off the bottom and 1 row off the top. It was 10 times easier to glaze, and no one really questioned it. I was just told them I wanted to feel different than my other existing gradient work, and they were like, cool. And I was like, nice. Okay, so no one knows what I'm doing, and that's just saving myself hours of work. Not having these exposed edges made a huge difference. I wanted to share this because I usually choose whatever is the prettiest when it comes to my work. Like making those cups harder with all the individual pieces, it was stupid, but looking good was always the priority. Then it turns out I wasn't so wrong. Changing this cup from a full lattice, which is something that I do all the time, to one that was pulled back actually made this more recognizable as something specific and special that I made for the Whitney. This client work has really taught me to let go, and you can see from like project 1 to project 2, there's years in between. But I'm trying to think critically about how design decisions affect both time and money. And my sanity. Okay, last project. This is a very small, short project, but it completely changed my process. I have made huge technical breakthroughs on this project that I have built on for the last year. A lot of brands come to me to ask for a design that I already make in their brand colors, which like, totally makes sense. The work translates really well to that. Except I got this email from Ted, and you're never gonna guess what color they wanted to work with. Can you tell me what color it is? Yeah, it was red. All colors in ceramics are made of metallic oxides, similar to fireworks actually, because they are the only pigments that don't burn off at 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. However, each of them have their own properties, and luckily for me, red is horrible to work with. And I knew this when I took on the project. Here's what I mean by horrible to work with. I almost emailed them back and canceled the entire project because this was it was just seriously not something that I thought I could solve. I started working on this underlay technique in 2019, and it was 2023, and I was still figuring it out. I am still figuring it out today. Finding material is really something that I don't get to talk about much, so the whole reason this project is in here is so I could tell you that it's hard. It's hard to do this from a chemical and material standpoint, and it is difficult to have that conversation because it doesn't mean anything to most people. I'm not going to go into details because it's very complicated, but also it has become very integral to the IP of this studio. I figured out the chemistry, the timing, the layering, all of it, mostly by accident. Doing something wrong and then it kind of worked and then freaking out and then kind of trying to do it again. And I imagine this is what scientists do sometimes, but it really saved my butt in this project. The mistakes that I made helped me make decisions that helped me change how I worked with this material. And what's crazier is that it completely changed how the studio works to underlay colors to this day. It took me 4 years of working every single day, including Saturdays and Sundays, to figure this out. There were so many days in those years where I just did not understand how to control this process. The image on the right is the entire underlay peeling off. It was a huge reality. It was so frustrating because I just didn't know why. If it happened on a small scale, I could touch it up. But this is a full redo, and that means time and energy for no money. The process change that I made on Ted's small project has allowed me to work with reds, yellows, oranges, colors that are much more delicate that I had avoided for years, and to do them in a way that is more reliable, efficient, and reproducible. Sometimes these projects have pushed me to do things that I otherwise wouldn't have faced, and they have always made me better. Even a little crazier, but always better. It has been a combination of mastering the process, having the technical skills, the design ability, and then the control over the chemistry and the material all in play together to make something like this possible. It wouldn't have existed 2 years ago. I just couldn't do it. Okay, I need water. Before I start this section, I did a photo shoot for PayPal, and the photos are popping up on the internet now. This was an ad in Germany, and I'm pretending like I'm running a business. And you know I'm pretending because I would never smile at the paperwork. But if you see these images pop up, know that I was just pressing spacebar the whole time, the entire time, and it wasn't even my laptop. Okay, I have tried up until now to show you mostly visible labor. I've alluded many times to things that are behind the scenes, but they might be things that you expect me to do, like design or prototyping. But there are so many more things that I do that you haven't seen. And you're gonna be like, yeah, I'm sure you do everything that happens in MWR, but are you sure that I get paid for it? How do I get paid for it? Okay, the same way that this bottle of sunscreen pays thousands of salaries, and I'm so serious right now, this can obviously be replaced with any consumer good, but this bottle of sunscreen costs $8. The big box retailer takes 25%, and you are left with $6 to pay for all the advertising, the R&D, everyone that works there, definitely the CEO's salary, and in addition to the product itself, and you need to make a profit. How many times have you said, this probably costs 5 cents to make? And you're not wrong, that resentment is real. But the age-old question of, how long did it take you to make this, which I personally get asked 130,000 times a year, is not the right question. Because we don't understand that as consumers, we do not pay for the cost of the product itself. That sunscreen would cost a fraction of what it does if you weren't also paying thousands of salaries with every purchase. It seems so obvious, but I don't think we think in this way. So when it comes back down to this cup would cost 30 to 50% less if I was willing to run this business for free. You're not paying for just the cup or even the time it takes me to make the cup. This cup has to pay for me to write emails, to mop the floor, and wash buckets. This cup has to pay for the time I spend DMing you back on Instagram. It has to pay for my assistants to work with me. It has to buy paintbrushes and tools. It has to make molds to design. It has to pay for electricity. This cup has a lot of responsibility, more than many adults that I know. This work has to also pay for things that don't make enough money, like most teaching opportunities. The assumption is that I take home $100 if I make a cup that sells for $100. How much can the material cost? But you're going to quickly see that it is not true, if anything, impossible. So when you work a job that is not salary, and your income comes from only the product, you suddenly have to track all the time that you put into everything outside of making the cup. Do we actually cover all the invisible labor, also known as non-billable time, overhead time? Honestly, probably not. But this is better than ignoring it. So these are screenshots from an app that I use to track time. This is the exact data from a week ago until yesterday. So last Thursday to this Wednesday. So you can see the things that I've spent time on. The second thing, teaching, is working on this presentation. I personally divide my time deeper into billable, which is work that makes cup, and non-billable, which work that does not make cup but runs business and gets cup to you. Because that tells me what percentage I need to add to the cost of the cup to keep this business afloat. I'm not going to get super deep into this, I will explain it, but my argument is that this is closer to how the sunscreen is priced and how I have to price the work for the studio for it to continue to exist. So on the left, you see just the hours that I've spent in the studio in the last 7 days. And then on the right, you see it divided by things that are billable and non-billable. So things that cannot be attached to a product, like cleaning or sending emails or doing studio maintenance, a million other things, photography, updating the website, social media, all those things come down to an average about 33% of my week. If I don't count for that time, then I don't get paid for that time. That means expensive cups. So for the last 4 years, I've chosen to publish annual recaps on social media to show people what happens when they buy a $100 cup. In 2021, I started sharing stats on the studio. I'd never seen anyone in ceramics, much less art, break it down like this. Literally, when have you ever seen art be transparent? In 2021, it cost me $48,000 to run the studio. I realized so quickly that I had to clear $100K in sales just to take home enough money to pay rent and eat in New York City. I was working alone. I was making work that I could make today with my hand tied behind my back. But at that point, it was such a huge challenge. And no one had ever talked about this. Everyone had just glamorized making ceramics, making it full time. And then the reality of it was so much harder than anyone had ever shown. Not to drag anyone, but I realized how many people had other sources of financial support and income very quickly. They didn't operate under the pressure and stress that I felt because they weren't truly living off of this work, especially not in New York City, especially not with student loans. So in 2022, I added an assistant and then another one, and that cost to run the studio went up. We made less work, but we did make more money. If you could overlay this on the images that I showed you of the year-over-year progress of the studio, you would learn so much about what was happening to me, to the work. And it's both of these things. It's not just the images and not just the numbers. It's both of them together at the same time. 2023. 2023 feels like modern day NWR. You're not going to process every chart by the time I'm done talking, but the expenses went up, the profit went down, which basically means I am fighting the work that I want to make and seeing it get more complicated and needing help to make it happen, but then not charging what I need to for it because functional work has always felt to me like it has had a ceiling. I'm still figuring out what to charge for this work and where it needs to be to support everything that's happening because the studio is changing. It doesn't look today like it did a few years ago, and you're going to see more of that soon. The biggest struggle for me has been that this work that you've seen is not comparable to most ceramic studios that I have seen. If you look at those images, my most profitable time period was when I was making simpler, cheaper work. It was just slightly better than other things that were out there. Which sucks to hear, but it's the facts. This is last year. This is the first year that I was like, I refuse to be embarrassed. This is what I make. Pre-tax. Do not forget that this is pre-tax. And that this is New York City. Well, not this, but that's where I live. I started to break down these numbers into the categories I showed before. So things that make cup and things that don't make cup. But I also fully went transparent with how much money I was taking home and how much money was going into expenses. Most of my expenses are not actually labor or materials, but all the invisible things that you don't see. And I wanted people to understand that. I also went back and showed you how this broke down over all the years that I was too embarrassed to share how much money I was taking home. I looked so successful on Instagram, selling out drops in 10 minutes, but I truly would have struggled to buy my own work in 2023. We're finally getting to a point where I was in 2021. I could have kept what I had in 2021, but now that you know me so well, you know that I couldn't have. This studio has not been about coasting. This studio has been purely about pushing myself. It has been an ambition project from day one. This graph doesn't exist for 2021, but it was 100% ceramics. Today it is 64. The structure of this business is so different today than it was a few years ago. I've gotten to work on corporate projects, to do brand work, to lecture, to teach. We even started moving into some textiles. Overall, most of my time is still spent making work, but I'm fighting time now. I need time in the studio to push the work, but I also need to take the big opportunities to continue to grow the studio and myself out there in the world. It has been a constant give and take, and I want to clone myself. But can you imagine two of me running around? This studio has come a really long way in so many ways. It is unrecognizable from what it was 5 years ago, and I hope it will be unrecognizable in 5 more. That's it. Thank you so much.